the Global Speakers Talk for inviting me and for allowing me the opportunity to share my voice. And I will definitely take Jeff's words of wisdom here. And Lisa, great information about the Sedona technique. I'll have to remember that as well. What I'm going to share with you are stories about how I got from where I was to making the decision to actually give a talk. So if you were one of those people that walked into a big dinner luncheon meeting where they would have a keynote speaker, and you hung around at the back of the room, not wanting to just go sit at a table, awkward, flustered, not wanting to talk to new people, then you were like I was. I found that extremely difficult. I was so incredibly shy that it was painful to talk to people I didn't know. So I was working for a company and working on multi-million-dollar projects, and found that I was very good at what I did at project management. I could plan, I could schedule, I could fit everything in. I could identify the risks and come up with a solution. All wonderful things for a project manager. What I couldn't do was talk to those things at a meeting without getting all flustered and stammering and beet red in the face. So my boss pulled me aside and said, I think you need some help. She knew what I could do, and she clearly saw what I could not do. She said, I want you to take a course on communications. Now, I had so much respect for her that I would have done whatever she asked, no matter how painful. And this course would lead to one of the first tips that I have is to find communications that will allow you to have a speaking role. Now, what he did was kind of brilliant, really painful at the time. He would give you 5 or 10 minutes, maybe 15, to go working with a number of other people to prepare for an opening of a presentation. And when you get up, if you looked at your paper, he would take it from you. So when it came my turn, I just seen him do that to half a dozen other people. And I looked at him and I started talking, and I just found myself looking down. So I looked at him and thought, oh, hell, you're just going to take this paper from me anyway. So I tossed it. Now, that created a lot of laughter, and I felt better, but it wasn't enough. And in that course, I learned what I was supposed to do to be a good speaker, the things I shouldn't do, all of it. But I could not bring myself to do it. I needed to do something else, which leads to tip number 2, and that is to find opportunities to meet new people. And I did that through networking. My boss enrolled me in the Project Management Institute, where they would have dinner meetings every month. And in front of that meeting was 45 minutes of networking with others. So you had no choice. You had to talk to people. So I go in, knowing nobody. They're all wearing suits. I was a technician with a technician's job, a technician's wardrobe. I was so out of place. I looked around for someone that looked like they would talk to me, and was so difficult. I could barely get my name out, let alone answer questions. So I had to do something to make a difference in what I was doing and how I was going to get there, because make no mistake, my inability to talk to people, of being able to present as a project manager, was interfering with my career. It was at one of those dinner meetings that I saw my first keynote speakers who had me mesmerized. I don't remember his name. I don't even remember what he was talking about. But what I saw was somebody who was so comfortable, so confident, so at ease. He used touches of humor. He had the audience enthralled. And I can remember thinking, I want to be able to do that. And it wasn't because I wanted to be in front of a room of what was 2,000 people, but it would have meant that if I could do that, that I could speak to people, I could present, I could move my career where I wanted it to go. So I knew what I needed to do. I just couldn't do it yet. So that leads to the next thing. And that is tip number 3, and that's to volunteer. So I volunteered with the PMI local chapter, and I went in to help them with their next conference. I volunteered to be on the committee of the person I admired most in the room. Guess what that committee was? Sponsorship. I had to call strangers and ask for money. I can tell you that I prayed for a busy signal more than once. And all I realized was this was not helping me, and it wasn't helping PMI. So I put that smile on my face for every phone call, and I just made call after call after call. The second year I volunteered, those calls became a whole lot easier. And it was about 7 years ago that I actually volunteered for something in my community. And there was a company that wanted to put a construction and demolition processing facility between communities of about 10,000 people. It would have been disastrous. So I volunteered, found myself as the chair, and subsequently found myself in front of 300 people in a room for the first time in my life. So what I found was, because it wasn't about me, I wasn't trying to impress anybody. I wasn't trying to influence anybody. It was like a large meeting. I was able to put fear aside because it was about families. It was about community, and it was about protecting the environment. So that was a huge help. So find a volunteer opportunity with something that you are passionate about, and that puts you in this kind of role where you have to talk to people or perhaps even present. So what did I do next? It was all about recording, and we've already heard this, presented so beautifully to us already. I found myself enrolled in my university course when I was in my 40s. And in the program, there were 3 levels of communications courses. In the 3rd year, we had to do a presentation to the board because they wanted to put a Wi-Fi network in on the campus. So I was elected to be the primary speaker with help from 3 others. So we did practice the night before. I was with my classmates. We were having fun. I did a great job. The next night in rolls the board, and in comes what I thought was a very, very, very large camera in on rollers. Our prof was recording the session. I froze. I did not do the job I did the night before. She asked me why, and I told her that the camera just paralyzed me. Yes, Jeff, I'm using your words because I was the paralyzed person in the room. And obviously, it didn't matter to the board. They were looking for the technical information, not an eloquent speaker, because they didn't get one. And what I found was the professor used that technique for the rest of the term. She recorded us. She would have us sit in a room, watch our presentation all by ourselves, to look and see what we liked about what we did, and to find the things that we knew we needed to change. It was an invaluable lesson. You can record yourself in a number of ways, whether it's doing a Facebook Live on your own newsfeed or in another group. Just make sure you go back and watch it. We have all kinds of opportunities to go live in groups like the Global Speakers Community. But make sure you go back and look at yourself, not critical, but just look and see where you want to improve something and what you liked about what you did. The 5th thing I have to suggest to you is all about feedback. Now, that same professor approached me after I graduated and asked me to participate on a panel of people who would act as if we were a board of directors, and the students were coming to us with persuasive presentations. We had to critique them. We had to look at everything from tone, from preparation, how they stood, their eye contact, how they dressed, everything. And I did that. She said to me afterwards, she said, You have great advice, but you're way too diplomatic. The students need to hear it bluntly, was her word, so that they really understand where they need to improve, because it was to help them in their career, whether it was a presentation or an interview. So I did that, and I did that for her for 5 years. And I have to tell you, every piece of advice I gave, I realized that I was still making those mistakes. So that volunteer piece and able to give feedback was invaluable to me. Now, I took that same technique as a director within our local government. I had a lot of people that I coached, and I gave that advice to them, even to some people that I didn't. There was a young lad who was so shy, so I understood where he was coming from, but he was so good at what he did. And he was asked to speak at one of our large departmental meetings. So there would be between 300 and 400 people there. He did a really good job speaking, but he did a thing, a nervous thing, and we all have one. And as he was talking, he was touching his face. And I watched him. He probably did it maybe a dozen times within about 10 minutes. I went up to him afterwards and I told him that he did an amazing job. But he did something, and I asked him if it was okay if I could give him a piece of advice. And he said, of course. So I told him what he was doing. He had no idea. And when we had that nervous tell, we often don't know. So I offered to go in and watch the next several presentations he was giving, and he graciously said, yes, please. So as he started to do that in the next speech, he caught my eye and he stopped himself. And I didn't see him do it after that. So go out and find somebody who will give you that honest, constructive input, that feedback. But you have to be willing to take the feedback. Now, these stories are all things that talk about where I painfully started on my journey to where I am today. And I am certainly going to use the advice I've heard so far, because I'm not yet where I want to be. But I do know this, that if you want to be able to speak in front of others, whether it's a large presentation, whether it's just to be able to speak in front of your employers, whether it's for an interview, whatever the reason, that you have to do it. Because if you don't do it, you will never improve. I remember the words of John Maxwell in one of his courses, and somebody asked him, how did he become so confident? And he said, when you've done it 1,000 times, confidence is easy. So we have to make sure that we do it over and over again. So my last piece of advice is simple. It is